First, I needed to learn the culture in order to change it. The second thing I needed to do was to show Christ's mission to reach the lost. For me, mission-driven ministry is like the silver bullet for change. It doesn't always happen that way, but it keeps us focused. I had to show Christ's mission to reach lost people. Now, when I first started talking about Christ's mission to reach lost people, it was like I was talking to an empty auditorium. It just stares reaching back at me. I was talking to aging believers about reaching out to lost people. It's like talking to a leper colony, telling them that they can be healed. They feel obligated to agree with you, but nobody really believes you. And that's how it was in that auditorium. I stopped trying to convince the group as a whole and began to focus in on the leaders. And we entered into an 8-month process that developed a mission statement that we felt reflected the Great Commission in the context of our own setting. We came up with 8 words that became our mantra, helping people discover, trust, and love Jesus Christ. That became like a battle cry for us. I mentioned it every single service. It was years before that really took root, but I mentioned it regularly, believed in it, focused on it. It was like a GPS heading for us. Our services began to change a little more. We began to spend money just a little bit differently. Genuine faith stories of people with changed lives were a part of the services. Our mission started to take root. We put it in print on everything that we possibly had. During one service, I had one of the leaders, key leader, lean over and he whispered these words to me. He said, "Everything you say is marinated in evangelism. You must believe that people think the gospel is way more attractive than I've ever seen." Now, I was encouraged on one hand because I knew that they were starting to finally get it, okay? I was discouraged on the other hand that this church had drifted so far from the gospel that they thought the gospel was unattractive. Now, I'd like to tell you that as a result of grabbing a hold of a focused mission, we began to grow. That didn't happen. Now, I've coached about 80 pastors in turnaround situations over the last 4 years. None of them saw traction toward their turnaround until they finally dealt with the third issue. First, learn your culture so you can change it. Secondly, show Christ's mission to reach the lost. And here's the third element. Make bold decisions. Those courageous decisions are absolutely critical. In fact, I think every turnaround pastor is either getting ready to make a courageous decision, in the middle of a courageous decision, or recovering from a courageous decision. It just seems to be that way in life. One major decision that I had to do was to begin to let staff go. I kept everyone when I came, but I had to let some go. In fact, I averaged a staff firing one person every 18 months for the next 15 years. I don't recommend that. That's painful. The hardest firing that I had to do was to let our church administrator go. He had been on staff for 26 years at this church. He'd been an elder on the board for 24 years and had been the treasurer for the last 10 years. And we were going different directions. Tried to mesh for about 2 years, finally came to a point where I knew that I had to let him go. Half of the board supported my decision, half of the board supported him. We had a showdown. I stepped into his office, gave him the news that he had 2 weeks to go. He was immediately on the phone to his supporting elders as I was. I knew a firestorm was on its way, and I absolutely couldn't avoid it. It had to be done. Previous decisions in my ministry in the past like this, I'd avoided. This one I couldn't avoid. I had to take care of it. One elder came to me and said, "We need to have a board meeting where you are not present." I said, "I'm chairman of the board. I don't think that's going to happen." He said, "Well, I think it should happen." So he waited until I was teaching in Charlotte and then organized a meeting with the other elders in Seattle. Not much I could do 3,000 miles away, especially since I didn't know it was happening. But one of the supporting elders emailed me and told me about the meeting. I have to tell you, that was a long night. Having been fired from my previous church, now hanging by a thread at the current one, it was long. But Jesus' grace is there. I knew that he was there. I came home. I didn't become fired. I was able to assume leadership. We had a meeting, worked the details out, actually launched this this fired staff member into a new ministry, supported him at a declining rate for the next year and a half. We remain friends today, but all of those elders are gone. Now, something else powerfully happened during this time. Because when I made the decision to let him go, I moved from being the Sunday preacher to the pastor. There was a shift in leadership that you could feel in the environment of the church. Up until that point, I had not done one wedding, one baptism, one baby dedication, or one funeral. All of them had been done by previous staff who had been brought in. I was the preacher, but not the pastor. But when that leadership decision was made, the rest of the staff clicked their heels and saluted and waited for order. I mean, it was just like, it was a stunning shift. You could feel the culture change, and I got traction to begin to lead. I don't think it was fear, but there was certainly levels of respect. I was reminded of David's own leadership in 2 Samuel, where it says David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel. And there was this sense that Jesus was walking along, doing for me what I couldn't do for myself.